So one of your big questions during the last lesson might have been, why? Why are we learning these horrible trig functions? What is this good for? What is this all about? What do I care about these? Okay. So these trig ratios, we'll find out in a second, will really easily be able to help us solve for missing sides. Right now, the only tool at our disposal to solve for a missing side in a right triangle is we can use the Pythagorean theorem. But we're going to learn some triangles in a second we cannot use the Pythagorean theorem on. So when we can't use the Pythagorean theorem, trig ratios are going to be the only way that we are able to solve for a missing side. Okay, so at the top of our paper, we're going to just write TOA to help us remember all of the trig ratios. Okay, so the next set of problems we'll look at is we're going to find the indicated ratios, so the indicated fractions, okay, and then use them to solve the missing sides. So this first problem here, I have a triangle, and I'm told to find sine of 24 degrees. So here I'm finally plugging in an actual angle into a trig function. So I'm going to write sine of 24 degrees down here. Okay. So what does that mean if I'm plugging in 24 degrees? Well, if this is the angle I'm plugging in, this is my reference angle. Okay. So remember the first step from last time is I have to go to my reference angle, which is here, and then I have to label the triangle A, O, and H. Okay. So there's the 24 degrees. Opposite from it, this would be O. This would be my hypotenuse, and this is adjacent. Okay. So now that I've labeled everything A, O, and H, since I'm using sine, sine should give me the output. I should get out opposite over hypotenuse. Okay. So my opposite is 10. My hypotenuse is x. Okay. So there we go. I found the trig ratio for sine of 24 degrees. Now that I have this set up, I can easily go ahead and solve for what x is. You might be like, oh my gosh, like how do I solve for something that looks like this, right? So we actually are going to use cross multiplication. Funny enough, we can take this whole entire thing, sine of 24 degrees, and we'll put a 1 underneath that entire thing, okay, and be able to cross multiply. So let's do the easy part first. So 1 times 10, that's just 10. Okay. On the other side, we have x times sine of 24 degrees. X times sine of 24. Well, when I do this, I can't really multiply those together, so I'm just going to put them next to each other, but they'll be multiplied. So x times, multiplied by, sine of 24 degrees. So I'll write it just like this. All right, my second step now is I want to isolate x on x completely by itself, so I have to get rid of sine of 24 degrees. Think of this as just like a number, okay? So this would be the same thing as like writing 10 equals like x times 7, okay? So think of this as just all one number. Actually, let me go back. So in this case, how would I get rid of the 7, right? Like I would divide both sides by 7 to get rid of that, so x is by itself. So it's going to be a little weird, but I'm going to divide this whole entire thing by sine of 24 degrees, because I want that to cancel out. I want it to go away, so x is by itself, okay? So if I do something to one side of my equation, I have to do it to the other side. So to the other side, I also have to divide by sine of 24 degrees. Okay, so when I do that, this cancels out over here. I'm just left with x, And then now this part, the 10 divided by sine of 24, I get to plug this into my calculator. Please, oh please, oh please do not use the calculator on your phone. I really prefer that you use the one in Desmos, okay? It's just going to make your life a lot easier. So if I was going to go over to Desmos right now, I'm plugging in 10 divided by sine of 24, okay? So here we get 10 and then divided by sine of 24 degrees, okay? One nice thing about this is in like your keyboard, you can actually just type in the letters S-I-N, and that'll give you sine, okay? Big warning I have here, okay? Before you take any test or do any problems of any kind, you have to make sure your calculator is switched over to the right mode, okay? So if you don't do this, this is going to mess you up so much in all the problems that you were doing. So please make sure that you go to the little wrench button over here in the top right-hand corner, and you're going to switch your calculator mode in Desmos to degrees, okay? We're not going to learn about what radians are in this class, but you will once you get to Algebra 2, okay? So for right now, we really want to make sure that we clicked on degrees, it's switched over to degrees, and notice how right away we get a completely different answer, okay, than if it was in radians. So please make sure your calculator is in degrees, and you might not be able to do that on your calculator on your phone as easily. Maybe you can, maybe it's giving you the same answer, but please just make sure it's in degrees or you're going to get everything wrong, okay? All right, so there is our answer. So 10 divided by sine of 24 turns into 24.585. I'm going to round just to the nearest tenth, and that should be fine. So 24.6, and it'll depend on the problem, like the ones that are in Khan Academy or Canvas. Just pay careful attention to what they're asking for. Check and see, like, are you rounding to the right spot, okay? So 24.6 is what I'm getting. So that side x is a length of 24.6 if I was to measure that, okay? All right, let's try this with another problem. So this one I'm finding tangent of 60 degrees. So first up, I have to label my triangle. Now, according to 60 degrees, I have to label it AO and H. So this is my opposite. This would be my hypotenuse and adjacent. What is my output? So tangent gives me the output opposite divided by adjacent. So my opposite is y divided by adjacent, which is 13. All right, so now that I have that set up, I've labeled my triangle. I found the ratio that it equals. I get to cross multiply. So I put a 1 underneath this trig function, because underneath anything, whatever it is, there's always a 1, right? Like if I have the number 7, there's a 1 that's underneath it. Okay, so I'm allowed to put this 1 underneath that tangent of 60 degrees. And if I cross multiply, I get 1 times y, which gives me y. And then tangent of 60 times 13. Make sure you write it like this. So you have 13 times tangent of 60 degrees. Be really, really careful that you don't take the 13. So don't take the 13 and multiply it by 60. Okay, that 60 is separate from the 13 because there's parentheses around it. So make sure you're putting that 13 just right out in front. Don't multiply it by the 60. Okay. So to actually figure out what this is, I just turn over to the calculator again. So I'm going to put all of this into the calculator, that whole entire thing, 13 times tangent of 60. Oops, not tan. Okay, so that's the answer that I'm getting, is 22.5 5 if I round to the nearest tenth. So that side y is a length of 22.5. Okay. Okay, now we'll work on the very last problem where it wants me to find cosine of 50 degrees. Okay, so here I would go to my 50-degree angle, label my sides O and H according to this angle. So this would be opposite of that angle. This is hypotenuse and adjacent. And then for cosine, the trig ratio that I'm getting out is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent, which is x, divided by the hypotenuse, which is 5. All right, so now that I have what that trig function equals, that's the ratio it equals, I can cross multiply. So 1 times x is x. And then 5 times cosine of 50, I just put the 5 out in front, so 5 times cosine of 50, and I leave the 50 alone. Don't multiply that by 5, okay? So 5 times cosine of 50, okay? And I get 3.2. So that side x is a length of 3.2. So that's how I would use each of these trig functions to solve for missing side.